conducted, so we're all learning new things. I'll just do a sound check. Just check. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up or? Okay,
Yep.
fantastic. So just a little bit of background. A couple of years ago, at the actually Cape meeting in Halifax, or even before that, we started to talk about is there a need for leadership development, leadership networking within Cape? But we had lots of discussion around that because there's all kinds of leadership options and programs and courses within medicine and outside medicine. But the discussion really was, we really should have something for emergency physicians. There's really a need for that. So with great enthusiasm, we developed a conference. We had a conference on leadership. Some of whom folks are here today were on it in Mexico in February of February last year. So the world changed completely about 2 weeks after that. And all of us have been very busy since then. We did feel, especially during the pandemic, as we're now in the third wave, the need for leadership direction and networking and commiserating is even higher. So with the support of the Cape Board, we worked hard to put this leadership series together. So we're delighted that you folks could join us. And we're going to, this is the first of 4 sessions for 4 weeks. We're going to meet at the same time for an hour and a half. It's going to be very interactive, but we're all learning. Everyone's adapting to Zoom this year. But what I wanted to do is just really reiterate, we're all learning together. So although we have I think an excellent faculty, it really is, we kept the group fairly small. So we have 19 registrants, which is fantastic. Some of them couldn't join today. We have 10 faculty, many of whom are here today. Not everyone could join, but the idea was, just like in Mexico, we really have a cohort, and we're really going to be exploring these issues together and working together on this. So that's really the concept behind you. So although we have faculty and registrants, we're all really learning together on this, and we're going to make this as interactive as we can. We're learning as we go. Some of you folks are probably a lot better at Zoom and sharing and everything than I am. But I want to introduce a couple of key people that help us on track. So first, Caroline Lapierre, who's you can see she can wave to you. So she's been really the brains behind all this, getting everything together. And most of you know Sean Ascaro, one of our great staff, head office staff, technical wizards at the Cape office. So they are helping to keep us all on track today and keep things together. So a couple of housekeeping things before we start. So a couple of things that you got in your package, and I know everyone in emergency medicine, we always do everything kind of at the last minute. So there's 2 things in your package that you got that are important to look at. One is the leadership reflection. So that's really a document just for yourself. I hope some of you have done it already, but I think it's really important that you go through that. It really kind of helps you think about leadership. If you want to share it with us, you absolutely can to the faculty, but it really is a document for you. And as faculty, we have been or will do that as well. So that's to kind of get your mindset. The other thing that we've asked for you to do is to send us your big hairy problem or one of your toughest issues, because in session 4, our last session, we're actually going to use that as kind of a forum to problem solve together and work through some of those issues. So some of you have sent those already, but please send those along so we can kind of prepare that for our 4th session. So that's just a couple of background things. So I just want to introduce the faculty that are here. And then what I'm going to do, because again, we'll all get to know each other. I'm going to go through the Hollywood squares here, and I'm going to ask you just to briefly introduce yourself, like what your interest in leadership is, and just tell us a little bit about yourself. So again, we can all get to know each other. So as I said, I'm Doug Sinclair. I'm here in Halifax now. I was in Toronto for 8 years, but most of my career has been Halifax. I've been the chief of both a pediatric and an adult emergency department. And I've done a lot of work, as we say, on the dark side in administration at various VP roles. But this year, I'm not doing too much clinical practice, but I've continued to have a clinical practice through all this time. So very interested in leadership and coaching, and it's really a lot of fun to do. So I'm going to introduce our faculty for today, and we have some of the other faculty on as well. So Judy Morris, Judy can wave her hand. So Judy is from Montreal. She's the vice head of the Department of Family Medicine at the and Emergency Medicine at University of Montreal. She is the, are you currently now the president of AMUC? You're incoming. So she is the president of our sister organization to CAPE. So that's wonderful, and long-standing faculty member working at Sacré-Cœur Hospital in Montreal. Our second faculty presenting today is Eric Clark. Eric's waving, he's up in my corner there. It might be different for you. So Eric is the deputy head of emergency medicine at the University of Ottawa. So as he'll tell you, when you're deputy head, that means you get all the jobs a head doesn't want to do. So he'll have all kinds of things to share with us. And I know there's a couple of other deputy heads on the list here. And he's also the chair of the CAPE CPD committee. So another important role for that. And then our third faculty member is Lois Bowden. So she's just to the left of me. So Lois is also in Nova Scotia. She's in rural Nova Scotia, the Valley Regional Hospital that you'll hear lots about. So not only does she practice emergency medicine, but practiced family medicine for many years, because I know many of you have that dual role. She was the chief of emergency medicine for 9 years, and now is the chief of staff for the hospital. But most importantly, for her leadership role, she's actually the co-owner and manager of a pub and microbrewery, which probably gives her most of the leadership experience and most of the issues to deal with. So that's our faculty for today. We have some other faculty members on. So Rod Lim, you'll meet him later. He'll get introduction on the third session. So he's from London, long-standing pediatric emergency physician, and is leading CAPE's work in wellness. And I see Huma Ali is on there. There she is. Okay, welcome. So she's a faculty member in Calgary, also has some lead work in wellness. Both Huma and Rod are going to lead our third session, which we're all looking forward to. I'm trying to see if we have any other faculty. I don't see anyone. Some will join us later. I see Lynn Garrow, though, on there. So Lynn is our executive director of CAPE. So thanks for joining. Lynn has a real interest in leadership and administration. Has been very supportive for this work. So what I'm going to do is we'll go and do some introductions. So I'm going to just look at the little squares that I have around here. So I'm going to go to Sarah.
Hi guys, I'm Sarah. I'm a emergency physician in Montreal. I work at the Jewish General. And I've actually got a big interest in physician well-being and wellness. And so that's why I'm here. That's sort of the leadership role that I've taken on in our group. So I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more over the next 4 weeks, and hearing from Rod also. We spoke last week. And yeah, I'm really excited.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for joining. Let's go to Michael Parsons. You're next.
After all these meetings, still got to figure out this Zoom business. I'm Michael Parsons. I'm academic chair in St. John's. I graduated the +1 year in 2007. I've been working full-time emerge here in St. John's since then. And as full-time faculty, kind of do a bit of research, education, and leadership stuff. So all around, several interests, several different areas.
Great. And Michael, you're new in that position, are you? Is that fairly new as the chair?
This November, coming up on 3 years, and I did a interim year before that. So it feels like, doesn't feel like a short time.
Right. You have to watch out those interim things can last for a long time. Absolutely. Okay, let's go to Melanie. Melanie Son.
Hi, everyone. My name's Mel. I'm an emergency physician in Calgary, Alberta at South Health Campus. I worked and trained in the Maritimes, and then I was in Ontario for a bit. So it's actually really great because I recognize some names like Dr. McGee and Dr. Clark and Lisa. So I'm taking this course because I've been working as a clinician, and I feel like it's time to do more, although I don't know what that more really entails. And for myself, I feel this disconnect between how I see myself and how I see real good leaders are. And I guess I just want to, get more of a vocabulary, or maybe more of a reassurance that I can do this, or see what skills and what kind of characteristics people feel are important to be good leaders. And hopefully I can kind of take that information and bring it to, I guess, my everyday work and maybe some future projects as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mel. Glad you could join us. Okay, next, Karine, have I said that correctly? Karine? Karine.
Karine or Karen, it's fine. I'm working in a community hospital nearby Montreal. It's called Saint-Eustache. It's at 30 minutes from Sacré-Cœur. Sometimes it's still like we are at 9 hours. So we are a small emergency community. We have a lot of problem. I'm the co-chief over there, and I want to develop my leadership style and skill in order to work out all the projects that we have to improve our emergency department.
Wonderful. Welcome. And as you can see from the profile, it's great. We got a big mix of people from different varieties and that different experiences. That's going to be so important as we all work together. Okay, over to you, Kirk.
Hi, I'm Kirk McGee. I'm the department head at Dalhousie. I've been the department head since 2017. And I guess my interest in this stems from, I was really lucky that the former department head, Dave Petrie, sent me to the AACEM chair development course in the States. And I found that very valuable. And it was interesting. One of the things that was a really good experience for me was being able to connect with other people that were sort of in the same headspace, and we had a chance to share our frustrations and our and our worries, and a lot of times our feeling that we weren't quite up to the task. But also I found it very valuable. I think in our leadership positions we get so caught up in the day-to-day running of whatever we're doing. It's often seems like it's 24/7. It was nice to have some headspace with like-minded folks to be able to just concentrate on what it means to be a leader in emergency medicine. So I'm really looking forward to learning from everyone.
Great, thanks, Kurt. Okay, Erin O'Connor, you're next.
Hi, everyone. Erin, I'm the Deputy Medical Director or one of the co-Deputy Medical Directors at UHN in Toronto, currently drowning under a huge wave of COVID patients. And honestly, all I really want to learn now is how to be like Lois and switch to running a brew pub. So that's what I'm hoping to get out of this. And Eric is, of course, nodding because he knew me when I was a resident. So
I just want free beer from Lois. That's why I'm here.
Same. Yeah.
There's no free beer, right, Lois? There's no free beer.
Oh, we can put you to work. Wash dishes, free beer.
Okay. And next, I just see your last name, Switzer. Diane, or no, sorry.
Hi, my name is Danica Switzer. I feel very junior. I started working in 2017. I'm a rural GP in Wawa, which is a small town in Northern Ontario. I guess I thought this would be good for me because we're losing 2 of our 6 doctors. I guess today is actually the last day, so we're going to be down to 4, which means that the 4 of us who are remaining, I'm having to pick up more responsibilities, committees, and other things that sound like administration. I think I have a strong interest in emergency care as well as critical care. So informally, I've been doing some work on simulation, as well as some sorts of like order sets, anaphylaxis, croup, asthma, etc. But I feel like I struggle to get buy-in from nursing and maybe from hospital admin. I'm also on the OMA Rural Expert Panel, but I feel like I don't really have any formal training or many skills in leadership, so that's why I'm here.
Wonderful, welcome. No, again, you'll have lots of experience that you can share with all of us. So great, thanks for joining us. Lisa, you're next.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Fisher. I actually work with Eric in Ottawa. Been in practice for about 6 years. I also work in palliative care, but mainly in Emerge. Recently, I've become head of a few of our committees in Ottawa, and I really thought it'd be like relatively easy to kind of lead this, but however, I found myself kind of struggling with engagement and getting projects done. So I've had no formal training in leadership. So super happy to be here and learn from all of you guys. Yeah, and I'll pay for shipping. No, I'll pay for the beer if we get free shipping. This might going to be my plug.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, Katrina, you're next.
Hi there, I'm Katrina Hurley. I am chief at the IWK Emergency Department. So two of my bosses are actually on this, which is Kirk and Doug. I'm from Newfoundland, so I've got a connection. I've got a connection there too. I am here, like the thing I struggle with right now is clarity of purpose and like kind of vision that you have where you sort of bring people along with you on that vision. I feel often like I'm just fighting fires, like, and just dealing with all the problems that come up, which doesn't give me that room to like actually have and execute a vision. So that's what I'm struggling with.
Great, thanks, Katrina, welcome. Let's go to Michael.
Hey guys, I'm Mike Ciccone. I'm an emerge doc at St. Mike's downtown in Toronto, and also actually mostly at Coda Valley. I'm also pretty junior in my career, but I've always kind of tried to get involved in leadership roles. So looking towards this to kind of identifying ways I can get more involved and kind of push through some of the admin issues I've been already butting my head against, kind of not being in that role to try and facilitate things like that.
Great, welcome, Mike. Nice to see you again. Fred.
Hi, everybody. Fred Voon. I'm in Victoria, BC right now. I spent a year in Halifax 20 years ago, and it still has a special place in my heart. In this chapter of my life and career, it's threefold for leadership positions. I'm the business lead for our Emerge Doc group of 40 and co-president of the Medical Staff Association here, which is about 1,200 docs. And we've got some big stuff that we're interested in, such as switch over to electronic health records, evidence-based happiness, and I'm also involved in peer support. But the third thing that I'm excited about is that I'm writing a book that's about to be published, a nonfiction health book aimed at all Canadians on health literacy and how to stay out of the emergency department and what to expect if you end up there. And to get these important messages out and to affect change, I've had to learn how to step into the spotlight. And this is what I'm looking forward to learning more about today.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks. Glad you could join us. Now, Julian.
Hey, I'm Julian. I'm an emerge doc in Winnipeg and a transport doc for STARS Air Ambulance here. About 7 years out and have a pathological inability to say no to stuff, which means that I end up getting asked to do things, but I don't really have formal leadership roles in those things. And so I'm hoping to develop the vocabulary. I really kind of resonated with what Mel was saying. Just the vocabulary and some of the skills to take a well-intentioned desire to help and turn that into something that approximates actual leadership. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thanks, Julian. Now I see a phone. Is someone on the phone? Is that just a backup? Okay. All right, so that's a great introduction. We have, as you see, we have a very diverse group, which is excellent because we can all learn from each other. So we're going to get right to it. So have you seen the agenda that comes out? The other thing from a housekeeping point of view I should give you is that there is a, when you go to your CAPE profile in the virtual series, you'll see the agenda for all 4 sessions, and there's some articles in there already, and there will be adding more material as we go along. So that's kind of your syllabus, if you will. We'll be building that. And of course, if you have particular articles you want to add or stuff, then just send them to Carol Ann and we'll put them and we'll build together a syllabus as we go along. We are recording these sessions because a couple people couldn't attend some sessions, so we'll have that all. But again, part of the whole concept was this, that like a conference, we really encourage everyone to attend all sessions so we can learn together. So we're going to get right to the program. So what's going to happen now is we're going to have 3 presentations. They'll be about 15 minutes each. So what we'll do is certainly just stay on mute during that time. And then after that, we'll have at the end of all 3, actually we'll see how it goes. We'll have some discussion back and forth with a panel, and then we'll open it up for discussions. And as I said, we've got you know, we'll finish as a 90-minute session. We've had 20 minutes as an introduction just for this first session, so we'll get right at it. So first up is Judy Morris, and her title of her talk is going to be Leadership: How to Get There.
So can you see the slides? Yeah, good. So I'm covering the basics, so how to get there, maybe for the more junior of you, but also I think for the more senior of you who are already in leadership position, you'll probably recognize, I certainly recognize myself in a few of those things, and also for your mentees and your students that you help out. Some tips a little bit.
Judy, just go to a slide presentation.
Oh, okay. Actually, you know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to do that. How's that?
It's still on. We can still see the two. There we go.
There you go.
Got it.
Okay, perfect. So let's dive in. I'm an ED doc. I should know leadership. It's part of our core competencies. We should be good at this. But ED docs and other docs alike, when put in positions of leadership, often either through objective evaluation or self-evaluation or surveys, people say that they were not prepared to be in leadership position. That our medical training is just not enough to get you ready for the task. So I've got a few tips, so hopefully they're going to help some of you. One of the big things is you got to know a few things. The first thing is know what you're getting yourself into. And you'd be surprised. And the goal of it is so that you don't feel overwhelmed, so that you don't feel like you are powerless. And, you know, we've heard butting heads against projects that don't come through. And also you feel overwhelmed with time and other pressures. Asking a lot of survey done in my department, people that were in position of leadership saying, I didn't know what I'm getting myself into. I was not really aware of the task. I didn't feel prepared, and I felt often lonely and overwhelmed. So by knowing a little bit more what you're getting into, you might be a bit more prepared and prepare adequately. So what are the requirements for the job? This makes sense, but sometimes you jump, say, yeah, I'll do this, but you don't really know what it involves. What does it involve in terms of time? What impact will it have on your schedule? What kind of shift offset can you get from it? If you don't have an official title, like Jillian was saying, maybe you're not going to be able to get the shift off, and then you're going to be overwhelmed with time. Who do you know in your organization, your hospital system? Who will you have to deal with, report with? That can make a world of a difference. If you're head of the hospital, someone that's, you know, talkable and easy to work with, or if it's someone that's really hard to work with. Who are your allies? I didn't write it. Who are your enemies? You know, who are you going to have to butt heads with? So this is all stuff that got to go into the balance when you're ready to get into or accept or jump into a leadership position. What's the salary? We're not good at asking, what's the salary? And by knowing the requirements of the job, you got to know that you're able to negotiate some of the stuff. Oftentimes, leadership positions are not the desired position. There's often not a lot of people that want to raise their hands and jump in. So no, and organizations, in order to go get good candidates, they're going to be able sometimes to be flexible. Maybe they're going to, there's some tasks that can be reassigned to other people in your organization. You can ask for more clerical support. If your current chief is just doing a bunch of clerical work that is chewing up all his time, salary can be negotiated, or a budget that you have allowed for your operating budget for if you're a program director. Those can be done at the time of your hiring, or if you're already a chief or a head of a department and they like what you're doing and they want to renew you, that could be an opportunity for you to ask for salary raise or other advantages. Is there support for training? We often say we get in and we don't have all the tools to become managers and leaders. Is your organization going to support your training to get some of the tools to become a better leader? Or will you have an assistant? Sometimes, you know, they can split one job position into two, and you can share the job with someone else. So those are all things that are, I think, doable, but that not a lot of people do when they get into a new job. please know this, I think Rod Lim would like this slide, that there are 24 hours in a day. And I think we're all bad at time management, and know that before jumping into a leadership position, you're probably going to have to cut somewhere else. And it's a very bad advice to cut onto sleep and cut onto other aspects of your life. So know ahead what you're going to have to drop in order to get into that position, because it's going to take, for the most part, significant amount of your time. This is I think a duh slide, but I'm going to let you read that quote from Gosling and Mintzberg. So it does involve management, and you get to know this. And this is one of the things that sometimes people, they see leadership and there's a sexiness to it, but there are some not so fun management issues to deal with when you're a chief, when you're head of a department. And you got to know that going in. So once you know the job, you got to also know yourself. The reflective mind is a big part of becoming a leader, being in a leadership position. It's certainly taught a lot in some of the business courses, management course, but it's really important to know yourself. Why are you doing it? Is it a change from clinical practice? Is it a challenge? Is it along your career path? Is it because you got a certain expertise and skill set and you want to change things? Or is it because you feel like you have to? And oftentimes, if it's just you feel like you have to, it's probably not a good reason. And you really got to put the pluses minus before choosing to jump in. Speaking of skills, this is more for some specific academic position. But one of my colleagues was saying, it's really good to get your hands dirty. If you want to get to a position, to have been on some committees, to have given the courses, if it's a teaching position, it really helps to have done the work, the groundwork, in order to be ready for that position. There's a bunch of course you're talking. I don't have, I'm telling you that there's not a lot of, we don't have all the skill set to get into leadership position. There's lots of courses out there that you can take, and people don't agree. Do you take it before you get into a leadership position? Do you take it when you've got a little bit of experience and you know what you need to get? This is tough, and probably within your organizations there's already courses set up. The course right now is a good start. And within those courses, you often have self-evaluation tool that help you know what's your style of leadership. There are some that are free online. I find that the ones that are guided within a leadership course are good. We had the chance to do one last year in the course with Susan Lee from Toronto. So it helps you know who you are as a leader, what are your strengths, how you deal with conflicts, how you deal with certain personalities. I find this is very good. What's the best time? We can discuss it later to do those courses. Probably a little bit early on so that you know what you have to work on moving along. Helping to identify your strengths and weaknesses. Look around, ask around. Sometimes we're our worst critic, and you say, I'm not quite sure I'm ready to get there. Ask people around. Oftentimes people will identify you as a leader, as someone who could be good in a certain position before you do. So that may be valuable information to help you know yourself. And if you're considering getting into a leadership position, know that there are barriers of all sorts. This is a picture I stumbled across recently. This is the founding member / board of AMUC back in 1982. I'm not so sure I would have raised my hand to become their president back then. So, and although things have changed, things have moved along, we still have work to do. It's not everyone that are represented in the higher circles of leadership. Actually, Doug and his team identified it at the Leadership Symposium back in 2015. We're moving along towards gender equity. We still have lots to do with ethnic minorities and people from various sexual orientations. And know that there are biases. Know that there are biases that are sometimes unconscious in the staff, in the people there. If all the people in the higher circles of your university look like the people in the picture before, it might be a little tougher for you, depending who you are, what's your background, to get there. It might be tough if all the meetings are at 5:30 p.m. and you've got young kids that you got to pick up from daycare and it's dinner time at home, it might not be easy for you to get into those positions. So know that the system is often made to be more difficult for a certain person to get into a leadership position. That can be part of your negotiations when getting into a leadership position. And know that you can be your own worst barrier. You know, we don't think we're good enough. We don't want to jump in. Again, ask around. Some of the help that's available, and that's probably going to come back a lot during these sessions, is get help from mentors. From the sponsor is more someone who's going to recognize your talent, who's higher up in the organization, is going to push you forward. Or you can get a coach. If you know you've got a specific weakness you want to work on, you can go and get a coach. Coaches are more popular. There's more and more physicians, ED leaders that have coach training and that can help you. Mentor, usually people that are more, have been there before, they have similar skill set that is required for your job and are going to help you along the way. And the last, I think, a tip I can get you in terms of help is be kind to yourself. And one of the tricks is I tell people, be kind, treat yourself or evaluate yourself as if you would evaluate your colleague, because often we're really harsh on ourselves. So before jumping in and thinking I'm not good enough, I'm not ready enough, if your colleague who had the same skill set as you was to tell you they wanted to jump in and get into a position, what would you tell them? You'd probably not be as harsh as you are with yourself. So on that, I will leave, I'll be happy to take your questions after, and I'll let my colleagues take over. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Judy. And we will have lots of time for questions, so we'll just kind of give that back context. So I actually have to do a housekeeping item that I forgot that I was reminded. So can you Caroline, give me the screen, or can you see that? Can you see that, Caroline, or what?
Sorry, are you going to share your screen, Doug?
Yeah. Yes, please.
You should be able to just hit the share button at the bottom.
Looking for it.
You kind of have to just hover at the bottom. It's a green share screen with an arrow.
It's my technical weakness. I can't seem to find it. I don't want to, you know what, we'll come back to it. Just why don't we just carry on? Okay, so our next, we'll carry on. I'll have to get our disclosure slide. My apologies. I should have done that at the beginning. I'm going to get in trouble with Eric, especially. Okay, so we'll come back to that. So our next speaker is Eric Clark, who we introduced, and he's going to talk about giving and receiving feedback as a leader. So you're up next, Eric.
Thanks, folks. Let me just try and get to. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the too much stuff on my screen here. All right, hopefully that's the whole slide and everyone can see it. Perfect. So as Doug intimated, I'm deputy head of a big unwieldy academic department. We have like over 90 docs, several hundred nurses, 2 sites that are sort of 90,000 visits a year each. So big and unwieldy, and pushing change through is a challenge. I've been doing it for about 5 years now, this job, and I wanted to talk about feedback, both getting feedback and giving feedback, and share some of my little lessons and a little bit of literature, and then some cases, and hopefully some discussion at the end, and have you guys bring up sort of your difficult feedback situations and how we would have all dealt with it ourselves, because I know there's tons of experience in this group of 20 some docs that we have here, because I certainly don't have all the answers to all of these things. So we're going to talk about why you should seek and give feedback and try and make it effective. Okay. some practical tips on getting helpful feedback for yourself as a leader, okay? Some practical stuff and strategies on how to give effective feedback to colleagues when you're acting either as a leader or a mentor, as a coach, or whatever it is. There's a few cases I'm going to mention and we're going to talk about at the end. And then you're going to get homework at the end. So you better listen, because you're going to have to come back in a month and tell us about how your homework went. So stay awake for that. Okay, so when you go and read up on this stuff as a leader and as a manager, manager is not a bad word, okay? And certainly for my job, that's part of what I have to do. It isn't sexy, but it's super important. And when you look around for literature, there's not a ton from the medical literature, there's a lot from business, and they'll see things like employee engagement and how important that is to have a good manager when they're trying to decide, is it the job, is it the manager, is it other factors? The manager themselves account for a huge amount of employee engagement. And so for us, that's our colleagues, right? The nurses and doctors and the teams that we work with. So that's a really important thing to think about. The second thing is that we feel when we're in a leadership position that there's lots of transparency, that the decisions we're making are open for everyone and they understand how we got to those decisions. And consistently that's been shown to not be the case. It's usually about half. Okay, if you think it's good, it's usually half of that. 50%, it's usually 25% is perceived by the people working with you in your group, okay? And then of course, the higher up you get, the less feedback you get. And so, you know, heavy is the head that wears the crown, is the old saying. And part of that is because you're a bit lonely up there. And part of it is because you're not getting feedback, good or bad, very frequently from people. And so that's a problem for us. If we want to learn, if we want to do better, if we want to keep it in the job, because you hear a lot of complaints or issues or problems that need fixing, but not as often as you'd like do people come and tell you, oh, that was a great meeting, or you did really well with that particular situation and how you handled it, which are the things that keep us going in these jobs, which sometimes feel like they don't have a lot of positive impact. This was a massive study from business. It was like over 50,000 places of business. And it's very clear that the more a leader seeks feedback, the more they're perceived as an effective leader. Okay, it's quite linear. If you seek feedback infrequently as a leader, you're perceived as a much less effective leader. Okay, so we should all be trying to get feedback from the people we're helping lead as much as we can. It shows respect. It says, I value your opinion. I value what you think. I want to learn from it. It helps with that trust and communication, understanding on both sides. It doesn't mean you always have to agree with what everyone is saying. We sometimes don't. If you're working with doctors, we all are opinionated and smart and interested and engaged people. And of course, we always think we're always right, of course, too. But it does improve the communication around all of that, which is very important. And then lastly, you know, you all are here and I'm here to learn and get better as a leader, to learn from all of you. And so getting good feedback is how you start with that. It's hard to know what to improve upon if you don't have never measured what the problem is or know where the problem is to start with. Okay, this is how you figure that out, by getting good feedback. Uh-oh. I'm sorry, my computer's jammed here. Oh, there we are. All right. So there's a few things to think about if you want to get some feedback from the colleagues in your team. Explain why you're asking, okay? You can imagine that people may not be initially open to giving you feedback, especially if it's going to be perceived as a criticism when you're talking to your quote unquote boss, okay? So you want to tell them, look, I really want to get better at running meetings or having these difficult conversations or encouraging people to take on a project. Can you give me some advice on how to do that? Be specific, you know, explain why you're asking so they understand. Be specific. So again, how are the meetings? How is my communication? How are my emails? Whatever it is that you are worried about or think that you need to improve upon, that's what you need to ask about. Be specific. Ask for positives. And no, this isn't just ask kissing, okay? I think we heard earlier how about as physicians and as physician leaders, we're often very hard on ourselves. And so it is important for us to hear some positive stuff. It also tells us what we don't necessarily need to work as hard on. If I'm doing really well in one thing, maybe it's because I'm working hard on it, or maybe it's not. But maybe I just don't understand or know if my colleagues feel I'm doing a good job in that. And so ask for some positive feedback as well, as some areas where you think you need to improve upon. Give people a bit of time to reflect and come back to you about it, okay? Hey, I see we have a meeting in a couple of days. Can you think about how that meeting went or how that conversation went? Talk to me then and see what you think. Is there something I could have done better or different, or how did you perceive it? In person, private, of course. You could say that maybe if you're going to call someone out for having done a fantastic job or gone above and beyond, that's the kind of thing you can do in public to sort of acknowledge someone's great work. But if you're feeding back on yourself, you want people to feel able to do that to you in a private manner. That's probably where you're going to get the most fruitful feedback from people. Sample widely. So I know in our group, we have our department head, we have 2 deputy heads and some chairs who are in charge of both research and then education. And we talk amongst ourselves frequently. The 2 deputy heads and our department head talk, and we sort of bounce stuff off of each other, get feedback. How did that go? But you got to ask other people, of course. You can't just ask your buddy or your friend or your yoga mate, how did that go? Because often they are your friend or your buddy because they think just like you do. And so, of course, you're not going to necessarily get what everyone is thinking if you're only asking the people that you feel comfortable asking. So you got to sample widely. You got to ask outside of your comfort zone a little bit. And the last bit I'll say about getting feedback is receive it with gratitude. You asked for it, okay? So say thank you for it. You may not like it. It may actually hurt. You may not agree with it, or you may think they're wrong, but you should be thankful for having gotten it, and think about what they are saying before you respond. My advice would be don't argue about it. You may need to have a discussion about how you got to that approach or opinion or idea or why you thought this was the right decision. But you should probably give it some time before you give the pushback on what that feedback is, okay? You want to make and ensure a good two-way communication between you and your team. And so if you're perceived as putting walls up immediately to any feedback, well, then you're not going to get feedback the next time, which is not what we want. And I kind of divide it into big and small things. And so there are sort of what I call the big departmental surveys or 360 reviews. If you're a department head in an academic center, our department head just had to be renewed. He'd done his first 5 years. So that process is driven by the university and the hospital, and there's like questionnaires sent out to hundreds of people, and it's a large team that meets and goes through all of that. You can do that on a smaller scale within your own department just for yourself. And there's lots of literature on how to do that. I'll share some lessons learned and what I'll call a thickened skin based on a member of our exec did a survey just to look at our exec's progress over the first 4 or 5 years. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of experience doing something like this within our group. And the questions were asked were intentioned well, but they weren't worded well. They weren't specific about what they were looking for or asking for. And it came on the heels of some challenging projects or ideas that had been proposed and sort of not well received by the group. And so the feedback that we got, the people who took the bigger picture approach gave some very useful feedback, but certain people from the team were very focused on that one project or idea. And it turned out to be quite hard on the people in the leadership positions because it got a bit personal and people took it quite hard, okay? Which of course is not great for the communication or the morale of the people in leadership positions either, okay? sometimes these jobs aren't easy and you do have to have quite thick skin. And so if you're going to do a sort of a group survey on what's happening within your group with regards to leadership and ideas and things, I would spend some time on looking around at how you word the surveys and being very specific about what you're looking for from the group. And then the second thing I'd say for that is make sure that people getting those answers, that it starts, you know, privacy, of course, is hugely important. It's anonymous. That's the only way to get good feedback, but also that the people seeing the responses, that is a very small group of people before it then gets rolled out to the larger group. The small stuff is much more apt and easy to get done. And this is, again, back to specific things like, how do you find our departmental meetings? How was that, you know, we had to meet with so-and-so to talk about a difficult issue. How did that conversation go? Done something better, okay? And that's kind of the small stuff that's a little bit much easier, I guess, not a little bit, to sort of get through. Remember that if you ask for feedback, reflect. Where's that coming from? What's the idea or intention behind that feedback? Evaluate what they're saying to you and what that means to you as a leader and what to do for it. Think about how you can take that and incorporate that into your leadership and act upon it. So if someone says, you know, the meetings, not everyone gets to speak up, okay? Okay, well, so let's have some ideas about how we're going to fix that problem and see how we're going to implement a solution to that problem. Follow up on it, communicate about it, and make a plan going forward. Okay, we're going to try at the next 2 or 3 meetings, this, and this, to see how if we can get better engagement from everybody at the meetings, that kind of thing. This is how you encourage that two-way conversation between you and your group. And then giving effective feedback. And most of us who work in academic centers have thought about this and learned about this and given tons of feedback to learners. I can't remember how many daily evaluation cards I've given now, over 15 years of giving daily evaluation cards. And many of the same things apply. There's good evidence, again, mostly from business literature, that if you are getting feedback, and that can be good, so-called good feedback or constructive feedback on a regular basis, that you get better engagement from your team, okay? That it encourages accountability, keeping things moving forward and getting stuff done. And it allows you as a leader to really reinforce your goals or ideas or strategy for where you see your group going or this project going, if it's a smaller thing that you're leading, okay? It really helps keep people on track. So there's kind of 4 different types of feedback. Directive, which is very specific. That might be something you would tell a junior staff member, okay, you need to do this specifically on this particular project. Contingency is, you know, if you keep interrupting people, they're not going to listen to you anymore and just tune out your message. That's kind of contingency feedback you might give to someone. Attribution feedback is giving or suggesting a motivation or an intention to an action or a behavior or something like that. And then lastly is impact feedback. And that's the most important. And that's when you tell someone what the impact of their action or behavior had, right? And that's really where we should be focusing. It doesn't sort of dissect details. It doesn't assume motivation of why someone did something or place blame. It doesn't tell people what to do about it. It allows them, at least at the start, to sort of decide what their solution might be, which is very, very important. And it's how you kind of start your conversation. You know, when you do this, I feel very frustrated, or I feel I'm not being listened to as a leader or a colleague or whatever it is. And so when I've had to be involved in what I would call some difficult conversations or providing some constructive feedback or even disciplinary discussions with physicians, this is kind of a nice little outline, right? So outline what the situation in it and be as specific as possible. So, you know, this meeting on Tuesday, this is what's happened, okay? Or these particular shifts were the shifts where it was documented that you were late showing up for. we need to talk about that. The behavior itself, just like when you're giving feedback to a learner, you focus on the behavior, not the person, okay? So you're describing showing up late, you're describing talking over people, whatever it is you have to have those challenging conversations about. But it's the behavior, it's not the person. And then being specific about what the impact is. You know, your colleague waiting for you to arrive late feels disrespected, feels you're taking advantage of them, whatever it is, okay? And then you can open it up to what was your intention with that presentation or that idea or cutting in, whatever it is, okay? And then it kind of leads that person to come up with an idea or a solution on their own. It allows you to gauge their insight in what the problem or the issue is, okay? Remember, you need, especially if this is more of a, what I'll call a constructive conversation or feedback you're giving, take some time and plan what you're going to say with them. Consider what the situation is, where the individual is at, what's going on with the individual at work, outside of work, if you know that kind of stuff, what's going on in their home life, their health. Remember, people process differently, and always check your motivation. Are you angry about something? Are you feeling like your authority is being questioned? Whatever it is, you need to make sure you're questioning and doing the right thing for your department and for that person you're having a conversation with. I recently had one of our nurse managers approach me with concerns about a newer staff's clinical practice and clinical care. I was a bit surprised. I sort of looked through the cases they brought to me. And so I knew that this doctor, very smart, very dedicated, would take this quite hard. And I didn't want to have them take it hard. I didn't want them to actually change their practice. So I really had to sort of couch what I was saying in their concerns, my concerns, and make sure I was messaging that in an appropriate manner to provide the feedback, but also not overwhelm someone at the start of their career and create insecurity where I really didn't feel it was necessary. Another one I had, this involves a bunch of the senior leadership and senior clinicians and my department head. There was a bit of butting of heads and lack of communication, and he knew that those parties involved were what he called they were adults who had all been around for a long time, who all had the confidence and the experience to sort of deal with this themselves. And it's kind of like what you did when your little kids were squabbling. You sent them off to solve the problem on their own, which worked out great. We had a conversation and we moved on. And so that was really good feedback given to some people who could deal with the problem in that way. Importantly, if you're having to have a conversation where it's constructive feedback you're providing, start with allowing the person you're to think and try and come up with a solution on their own, or at least brainstorm together with a solution. Don't immediately get to that authoritative response, okay, unless it's really important. And then arrange follow-up, right? Maybe they don't have an answer right now. Maybe we'll meet again in a week and decide, or we can just email and say, okay, I'm going to work on this and here's how I'm going to do it. But give a little time to sort of think about the best ways forward. I'm sure everyone on this has had to provide some feedback. It's not something we generally enjoy unless it's positive feedback, right? That's easy to call someone out for having done a fantastic job. The challenging constructive feedback, I think, was where we all kind of cringe and get a bit nervous about giving, but it's such an important part of our job as a manager and as a leader. So here's your homework, okay? I'm going to get you in the next month to get feedback on one specific little thing, not do a departmental survey, but one thing, how you ran the meeting, how that project moved forward, just how that communicate, whatever it was, from one person. Think about it, do it. You don't need to share what it is with us. And it can't be your buddy. It has to be someone you may not normally ask for feedback from. And then the second thing is consider giving some feedback, both positive and then seeking some constructive feedback from someone, okay? All right, any questions? I think that's all I got for you. Or Doug, do you want to sort of move on to the next talk and then we'll come back
Yeah,
together?
I think that's what we'll do. So we get some background and then we'll have lots of time for questions.
Perfect. Because I'm sure people have all kinds of issues or ideas, and we can share some wording on how to word those challenging conversations.
Absolutely. Okay, so over to you, Lois.
Okay.
Your
Thanks,
topic
Doug.
on survival once you've decided to stay.
All right. So, and I will not write. So you can see my screen there.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So how to survive when you decide to stay on in a position or in a situation. This is really a case study on a disruptive development or disruptive departmental behavior that we had in our hospital. So I am in a hospital that is an hour outside Halifax. It's a small group, small town, 13 of us when this episode went on. We have 40,000 visits a year, and we had been an incredibly cohesive group. Everybody cycled together. There were trips taken together, and there was a splinter group that raised valid concerns on global health issues. They felt that administration was running the show. There wasn't enough docs input, and they felt that I was in a conflict of interest as the head of that department. At that time, there was the position I was in had grown. So I had started out in one position. I ended up doing two jobs at once. And this is where they felt I was in conflict of interest with this. So their challenges were correct, or their questions were correct. Their process was not. They did not engage with the established committees and routes of addressing issues. And there was a significant amount of media, social platform engagement, and this a term that I came to hate, which is gaslighting, where somebody makes somebody else feel they're crazy just because they undermine them so much, which was certainly how I felt at that time. So out of this situation, we had a number of fallouts. There were troubles with the physicians in our group, with the nurses, and within our group business structure as well. So this tale, this story that happened to us over about 18 months, brought forward several points and kind of lessons as to how to run my own personal life, how to act as a leader at that point in time, and also for a more general approach to being a leader. The resolution was we had an external review by Howard Ovens. We did not have any financial or clinical problems. That was never the issue. We did have a bit of housekeeping to do with structure and governance within our department. And interestingly, within a year, we had actually won an award from our provincial organization for being a creative, innovative department. We did have settling of chaos, the loss of 3 physicians, or as we like to say, they were traded to another team. There was a new administrative position created, and there was organized handover of leadership. So the question, when you think about why would you stay? Why would you stay when there is something like this going on in your department? Or why would you think that you could fix it over time? And the phrase that people would say to me or I had in my head was, it's the right thing to do. Well, how do you know it's the right thing? Who decides this? Why are you doing it? What's the motivation? Am I just mad at them and I'm trying to get back at them? And I'm just trying to get them to see that I actually have all the answers. And my pride usually goes before a fall. So when I think I'm doing something well, I have learned that I'm usually about to get knocked out from left field because of something else I was ignoring. So you have to have the right amount of confidence, ego, and leadership style. And when I looked and reviewed leadership styles, there are up to 13 different subsets in the spectrum from democratic to autocratic. And you will slide up and down that scale depending what the situation requires. So then once you've got that in your head, I used to have this little mantra in my head as I went around into some of these meetings. Cotter's stages are a very organized, thoughtful process for planning and organizing systemic change and surviving and planning within your department. I will not read them all out here. They're easily found. And that's great for some things, but it wasn't necessarily right for what we were dealing with disruptive behavior. So how do you manage that? How do you present change? So you have to be curious about what they want. I had to sort out in my head, what was it they were actually after? Where did we need to be and want to be in short term and long term? And if we all wanted the same thing, we wanted to get our patients out of hallways, we wanted to be able to have time to breathe on break, we wanted to be on shift, and maybe even have a break. And you wanted to be able to balance your personal life, not going home exhausted or picking up extra shifts. So we all wanted that. And then you have to be careful that for the things that will trip you up as you are trying to incorporate or pull these people into the fold. And when I went to look for things or images that would trip you up, I was looking for kind of the loose rug or the floorboard, as we often see accidents about. And this is what I ended up with, an entire page of images like this, because these are images for trips that you would take if you're on psychedelic drugs or high and you want it to be visually stimulated. So a perfect example if you don't always get what you're looking for. So things that will trip you up are exploitation of your own or your system's weaknesses. So I like everybody to get along and to hang out and just sit down and fix things. And that's a weakness of mine. Our system's weakness was that we have had several restructurings within Nova Scotia Health in the last 5 years. And there were variations within accountability, who's running the show and what's happening. Complacency of other group members was a big problem. Many people in our group, as this unfolded over the 18 months, just wanted it to go away. They didn't want to become involved. They just wanted to do their shift and go home. And that actually gave more impetus to the splinter group to carry on. Organizational vacuum, I mentioned accountability, but we did not have the right people in the right places across a standardized format across our zone in Nova Scotia. We are divided into 4 zones. The zones were inconsistent in their standardization, in the payment to positions within emergency department leadership, and into where that money came from, our Department of Health or the Nova Scotia Health. So you can see that those are the things that will trip people up. And one of the big things that tripped us up was our outdated business arrangement. We had a 25-year-old governance and operations structure, and it actually absolutely became a disaster throughout our period. So what can you do? If those are the things that are going to catch you and give you trouble, you can try and separate out the threads. Is it a quick situational thing that you can sit down and sort it out? Is it a longer systemic process that you're going to need higher administrative help for? Or is it a personality trait? And we had an entire psychiatric diagnostic dilemma within our department, and those personality traits certainly fed our problems. I think you have to be realistic about what you can achieve. I'm not going to fix global overcrowding. The problems that were highlighted in our department are universal. It is what we are all dealing with all the time. Administration can be helpful or an absolute hindrance, but you can make small changes and shifts within your old world without blowing up the entire system, which was what our splinter group wanted to do. I had chosen to work within the system. They wanted to blow the system up. And then you have to brace yourself, because it can be really, really challenging. So for all the social platforms and all the media taglines, the things that you're going to read about yourself, the things that people are going to come and say, hey, did you just see that? Or, oh my God, did you see what somebody just posted? The tagline on our splinter group was make emergency great again. They had t-shirts, they had a GoFundMe program for hospital beds because they felt the government was not providing enough. And the parallels with, of course, Donald Trump were obvious. There will be lack of balanced reporting within newspapers and CBC, everything like that. And there's an inability to respond and tell your side because the media doesn't really want to know your side. They just want to have the drama of the story. You'll defend yourself at coffee houses and at friends' parties, and you have to try not to take it personally because actually it is not about you. So here's some battle tips for both getting through an acute situation and which of course can transport into long-term planning. So the givens, diet, exercise, just the right amount of alcohol. I do own a pub. And your usual cohort of family and friends around you. My mother is 93, lives in the house in St. John's, Newfoundland, where I grew up, and she would call me up and she would say, "And how are those bullies today?" And it was that kind of comment that would just put it in perspective. Email communication was one of the biggest problems we had. And I would comment to anybody that if you can, shut down your emails. As we all know, the tones, the inference are not always correct. And within that, there would be one of the manic personality within our splinter group would work night shifts and send out torrents of emails. They were destructive, they were unpleasant, and I made the massive mistake of starting to read them when I reached for my phone before I got out of bed in the morning to see what had come in overnight. Don't do that. It's an absolute disaster. You need meeting rules. It can be Robert's formal rules of order. It can be a pared down set of rules that works for you. And you need somebody taking minutes, which is not you because you're trying to run the meeting. You need a code of conduct with the inherent respect, kindness, listening tree. And it is the listening that I found the hardest to do. Eric has often just mentioned a moment ago about it. We tend to overtalk. And, you know, I think we often think, or certainly I feel that I could just fix it if you just listen to me. So I still work on listening rather than talking. In some of these meetings, you have to have a preordained referee, somebody who can just call a timeout, and you will not need these things until you wish you had them. Go back to trying to engage them depending on what level it is. Invite them to meetings and on committees. Again, be curious. You mightn't be empathetic about what they want, as Doug says, but you do need to try and understand where they're coming from. Trial periods of things for 1 to 3 months. We tried an infectious respiratory unit. There was an absolute wall up against that. There's no way they were going to go for it. And we finally softened it and worked with them enough that we could try it. We said, well, we'll try it for a month. And if it works in a month, we'll see where we are and we'll evolve it and adapt it. So those pieces were quite useful. And at any level, as you walk through these things, if you're an administrator or a leader, don't give up your clinical work. You will rue the day, I think, when you give up your clinical work, because that's what gives you the credibility to engage them and to have your voice heard at the administrative tables. How do you build your resilience to keep going? Can you walk away? Every night that I went to bed, I said, could I walk away? Do I have to do this? And every night when I said, yeah, I can walk away from it, it gave me the energy to go back the next day. Work experience in other places over your career. If you're working in one place now, if over the next few years, you can get some experience in other places. Our hospital is a regional hospital, but I've worked in a small place quite regularly in Digby in Nova Scotia, where you call in the lab and you call in X-ray when you need them. I've worked in New Zealand and a couple of trips to the Antarctic on a ship. So anytime you do something like that, you're getting other ideas that you realize there are many ways to do one thing. Anticipate what they're going to do next. They're likely going to double down. If you think that you've won a battle, again, I think I've stomped out the trouble and the dissent, they're likely coming back. So don't feel that you've won a major battle until things have really settled. Build a cohort of supporters in your group. It was the wife of one of the colleagues in our group who kept emailing me and just as a voice in the wilderness telling me to hang on. And I put this in because the number of emails I received from people like Doug, like Kirk McGee, and all across made such a difference to me, feeling that I actually was holding my own and I could get through this. So I put this in. If you see a colleague in distress or in disarray, email them. It will go a long way. And get rid of the dress. So I had a particularly horrible meeting that I chaired. It was a disaster. It turned around and the meeting was over. Whenever I saw that dress hanging in my closet, it reminded me of that meeting, of the nausea I experienced and the discontent I had coming out of it. So I threw the dress away. I think you need to do something creative with your hands. Every time you do some woodworking, play a musical instrument, knit, make some pottery on a wheel, you are doing something that settles that angst side of your brain. As well, be cautious with the send button. There's a note in one of the registrants' comments. The question was, what's the worst thing you've ever done or the thing you most regret? I hit the send button once when I should not have. And we probably all have, but it is a lesson hard learned, but stays. But I did use the scream emoji a lot to a select few friends. Watch your ego, make sure you're still doing it for the right reason, that you're not just mad at people or getting even, and a couple of good friends can help with that. And is the spark still there? Is it still fun? Have an elevator spiel for walking in from the parking lot with a urologist one morning, and JP said to me, so what's going on in there? He didn't really want the whole story. He just wanted to know the hospital was still going to be standing and we were going to consult him appropriately. But he did reach out, and it's good to be able to have a short answer for some conversations. Journal weekly summaries are helpful. They put it in perspective, and it's actually nice to have a record a year later as to what went on. Watch for flash points, trigger points that can seem absolutely ridiculous, that they're not going to become anything, but they blow up. And as they start to blow up, don't ignore them, fix them fast. Consider when to go to the college. We're programmed to multitask and compartmentalize. We're programmed to give answers and diagnoses immediately. I don't know if that's a help or hindrance. It's probably both, but it's the way we usually approach things in the emergency. So the last couple of reflections. You will absolutely question your ability to lead at some time. The imposter syndrome is always just underneath, but I think it's really important, as Erica's commented on, to get feedback when you feel like that, and to ask for some opinions outside your own sense of self-doubt. I wonder, still, could I have shut the whole process down better way back in the beginning? Humor does not always work in these intensely antagonistic or difficult meetings. It will be misinterpreted. And I have been accused of being sarcastic when I thought I was trying to light the mood. Leadership style, I've mentioned, it will slide up and down that scale depending what you're doing. Ultimately, we have more physicians engaged in our department than we ever had before. Be aware it will consume you in the middle of the night. It can be phenomenally destructive. And just a caution about it always being new members and hesitant for that. These were actually long-term members in our group where this activity came from. 18 months later, there were still letters being written to our local newspaper by one person in the group. Ultimately, I was satisfied. I stood up. And don't underestimate your role as a connector. You may not be able to fix everything. You may not be able to provide the perfect solution, but you are a connector, and you can make that connection happen. And I did not know Eric's slides before this, but my last one is have regular performance evaluations so you have confidence and credibility for yourself. And back to you, Doug.
Wow, thanks. All three great presentations. Thanks, Lois, so much. I know that was a difficult story, and those of us in Nova Scotia have watched your courage through all this, and the place, Valley is in a much better place thanks to your resilience. So really important for the patients of Nova Scotia fundamentally.
Thank
So
you.
that's a lot you've all heard, and we do have funny how the time goes by. So we got 15 minutes, big group here, but this is just the beginning of the 4 weeks. So let's open it up for some questions. Let's some of the those three of you on the panels, do you have questions for each other or things that you kind of scratching your head about that heard, or some comments? We'll start the panel off, maybe questions for each other, and then we'll let folks chime in. I'll be kind of the host on all this.
So Judy, I have a question for you. Where do you think or what's kind of the balance between learning as you go or formal training in and programs into leadership?
It's very interesting because I've done a bit of both. I've done training before before getting in. I've done like a formal university leadership course. It helped me. I think those courses help you maybe know yourself a bit better. What are your skills or strengths, weaknesses? But then when it comes time to discuss, challenges you face, you don't have many to discuss. And since a lot of those trainings are based on, kind of a reflexive mindset, and you got to evaluate yourself and evaluate. And so sometimes, and a few other, surveyed like leaders, I'd be curious to know what people think around the table. Yeah. I've said that maybe a few years in, they have a lot more baggage to kind of discuss and reflect upon when doing those leadership courses. So maybe an intro earlier on might be interesting, but later on, maybe something dig a little deeper might help as well, might be as beneficial.
Better way.
Questions from the panel?
So just to try to connect the three talks a little bit. Great talks, by the way. Really resonated with, I'm sure it doesn't matter what level of leadership, we've all been in similar situations. Just in terms of, I think it's important to see that no matter how experienced leaders are, I think they all doubt themselves or have periods of crisis, even though it doesn't show necessarily to people. I think I haven't met many leaders that haven't gone through a lot of wondering about why they're doing this or the toll it's taking on them, and trying to maintain the resilience. And one thing I wanted to highlight around kind of connecting Lois and Eric's talk is around, seeking feedback, but it kind of plays into like, you really only kind of want to hear positive feedback. And when someone gives you negative feedback, it kind of feeds the imposter syndrome and the shame. It hurts to get negative feedback. I think all of are that. And I think, being prepared mentally as to why it is you're seeking it, and being honest with yourself and being ready. You don't put yourself in those situations until you're ready to hear the honest truth. And just pay attention to the fact that if people aren't telling you things that you're doing well or not well, then you should be seeking that out, because that information is just so important. But just wonderful talks.
Yeah, go ahead, Kirk.
I just really wanted to say thank you for the talks. They were excellent. I wonder if you guys could speak a little bit about your experiences from being group members to being leaders in your groups, because I think emergency medicine is still fairly young as a specialty. We don't have many people like Doug Sinclair that I would regard as a professional leader. We have a lot of people that are coming in from internally within their own groups, and our groups are often very tightly knit. And how do you go from being a group member where you're one of that group to now having to be a little bit detached and to be the leader of that group? And how do you handle that new responsibility, that new set of stresses?
It certainly is isolating sometimes, especially if part of your role is kind of the classic vice principal role, where you're perceived as the disciplinarian or whatever, the person that handles complaints. My friend Andrew is that's his job, right? And so everyone hates getting an email from Andrew, right? And so that's pretty isolating. And it is a challenge, and you sort of have to have some people you can talk to and bounce ideas off of, that you feel comfortable doing that with, whether it's other people in kind of similar roles within your group or outside. I have some friends within the group in similar roles, and then some of my non-medical friends who are like, you know, CEO of a company and other, you know, partner in a law firm and things, who go through some of the many same things we go through. I find that quite helpful. And a chainsaw. I bought a chainsaw for my cottage. I find that very therapeutic.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Had a good, Fred, you had a good comment there in the chat box just about specific feedback. I think your question was really around using very, like we're used to having, you know, a 10-page feedback form, but you were saying, has anyone had any experience focusing on very brief, you know, like are you happy, yes or no kind of thing? Is that what you were talking about? Maybe you could explain that and have some discussion on that.
Yeah, I get this email from a company called Tiny Pulse, and I haven't subscribed to it, but I think their methodology is to have a very specific question, because we're all tired of you know, even one pagers and the stereotypical short attention span emerge doc. So I've experimented with that in our newsletter going out to medical staff to at least get a sense of where people are at, because it's easy to preach to the converted or the already engaged, and how do you draw in all the disparate voices to make sure that as a leader you're representing all of them, including those that might be a bit tuned out or turned off. Anyone have any experience with the tiny surveys instead of the, you know, comprehensive one-on-one type of feedback?
We've done Tiny Pulse I'm familiar with. When you search stuff online, they're one of a bigger company that does all kinds of business related feedback surveys, and has some good data on, you know, how to structure the question, how to structure, you know, if it's a multiple choice answer or asking for written stuff. We've done a couple little smaller things, like just on scheduling and what people want to, because that's one of my jobs, is running the physician schedule. And so asking some very specific questions just about the scheduling and the schedule committee and how we're doing and what you want out of your schedule. And then we've had some bigger ones that are more sort of broad-based and things. You have to space out the bigger broad-based ones because people can only do those so often. And you certainly can't do them in the midst of a pandemic where, you know, for most of us right now, we're just trying to survive week to week, and everything else, like making forward progress, is not happening right now. It's putting out a fire and preparing for the next fire. So.
Yeah, thanks. Go ahead, Judy.
Yeah, just one little thing to add. I mean, to both of the questions. I think the quick surveys might trick you into thinking you've got the pulse of everyone, and there's still the ones that are not engaged, you know, gotta be careful, might not answer your survey, so you might still not have their pulse. And I think to answer your question and the previous question, my reality at the university department is a huge department. We don't see the people that keep, you know, people involved in chiefs and other people in charge of teaching. We don't see them on a regular basis. So they're far away. So it's sometimes hard to send the messages out. So what I find helps is just also using the one-on-one, talking to people, working on some projects with people, because at the start, I was like sending emails and getting like 3 responses. So it's like the message is not heard. So yes, the surveys are quick and get the general idea, but sometimes you need to get in and talk to people and get some one-on-one.
I think also a change as well, like if you bring in, and it depends on your department and your structure and your cohort, but bringing in a particular person for a task, if you had a deputy person in your department and you gave them a task to do, sometimes they have more energy than what we're trying to do in the big overall picture. So can they take a piece of feedback or a particular problem and try and get information on that? Sometimes trying to break it down or having a different person do it will attract a few new people or a bit more interest.
Great point. Look, Judy, I wanted to pick up on something you were exploring just on when you talked about taking on a leadership position, trying to get the resources or some salary support. Can you just give a bit more tips on that? We all know that once you take a job, right, you don't get anything. So
no,
maybe
you're on your own.
And I know some others have been in those negotiation positions. Sometimes you've actually had to negotiate with me.
Yeah, well, one of the examples I was thinking about is like we've been trying to get someone to replace our CPD director, and it's a big department. It's family med, it's emerge, and no one wanted to tackle that job on their own. The person that was there previously had a bit more time and wanted to do it all. And so we found people and they said, you know, I'm willing to do the ER part and I'm willing to do the family med part. So we split the role and we were able to get them some support for both of them. So that's kind of one of the things. And I was surprised at how kind of easy it was. Or you might just justify saying this job requires a lot more time, a lot more involvement. I need to get more resources for it. And I've found that people are a bit more open to that than I thought they were. I thought it was like, you cannot even ask those things.
Slightly tangential to that, I think too, is fitting the right person to the right task. So purely at the pub, we had a server who would not do what we asked her to do. And we would ask her again and again. We actually brought in a resource person to say, how do we get this woman to do these tasks? And he said, well, you've got it all backwards. He said, she's never going to do those tasks the way you want them. You have to give her a different set of tasks that she's actually going to excel at. And she did. So it was actually interesting. You know, you can't necessarily make the person change, but maybe you can give them the tasks that they will excel at as well.
Yeah, really good point. Because again, we have a tremendous skill set within emergency medicine. That's often what I've done, is trying to find the right task for people. And often they're not successful because they're actually in the wrong job. And again, the thing with physicians, we know if you can give some resource to protect some time, you get so much out of it. But if you don't give them any resource, docs will take stuff on, but eventually they'll either get resentful or they'll get burnt out. So that's important. And I think what, you know, speaking as an administrator, Judy said, like if someone comes to me and they ask for something and they got a reason and a deliverable, I can usually find money for it. But I think if you just you just have to kind of be at it. Katrina, you have some experience in that.
In getting money?
Getting some resources, a little bit.
Getting some resources. I did have to negotiate with Doug.
Just to call you out as an example, I mean, I think, not to pick on you, Katrina, but you know, you were looking at a position. Katrina was interim chief. She held out for a few months until, I mean, she had a very reasonable offer for what she needed to do the job. And she didn't take the permanent job till she actually got, you know, what she needed to do it. And I think, you know, we don't, you know, that's uncomfortable, right? Can you talk about that a little more?
Yeah. It was really uncomfortable, actually. It was uncomfortable. I had to make the decision about whether I would sign the shitty offer or whether I would, you know, walk away. And so as opposed to walking away, I decided I would just stay as interim. I would not sign the shitty offer because it's ironic that the shitty offer was actually worse than the offer I had as interim. So I said, I will just stay in my interim role and they can declare a failed search if they wish. They can try to offer it to somebody else and I will just stay here until you fill the job. And so I held out. And then and until then, in my interim role, I had not really moved into my office because I considered it kind of not really mine. But I said, that's it. I'm going to own this interim role just like it really is mine. And I held out. And then there was a turnover in the leadership position and Doug got the job. And so I had a more sympathetic negotiating partner.
But that's great. You made yourself, you know, they saw how valuable you were to them. And then you said, you know, I'm leaving. So it's great negotiation way of doing things. I perhaps have a question for on feedback. And I think that came up in the questionnaire. How do you tackle feedback for maybe people that are, you know, well-established, well-respected, maybe a bit more senior that have been, you know, how do you tackle that? And sometimes, you know, everyone needs feedback.
Yeah, we all do. You know, and I think generationally, well, you see learners nowadays getting feedback all the time, which is not what we got, you know. And when I graduated, I went for years with almost no feedback, aside from the charge nurses yelling at me when I did something stupid. That was my feedback. And over the years, that happened less and less. But nowadays, these people graduate and they're used to getting feedback after every shift, and they want more frequent feedback. They're open to that. So the people like myself, and we have a bunch of people who are in their 60s and still love working and still work. And how do you give feedback to them? It's hard. It's harder for them to readjust as well after so many years. I think you use the same kind of approach though. Because most of the people, at least in my group, who are in that sort of more senior bracket, do it because they love it. They still want to do a really good job. And if you approach it from that perspective and sort of outline exactly as I sort of said, what the behavior was, what the impact of that was, many of them will at least listen to it. There's no question changing your behavior after 35 years of practice is much harder than after 2 years of practice. But it can be done. Skin's a lot thicker at that point too, so you can be a little more direct. And you know, I mentioned sort of a recent conversation I had with a very senior member of our group who has had an amazing emergency medicine career. And the two of us have good respect with each other, and we will disagree now and then. And I gave him feedback and he listened and he gave me his. But I think because of where we're at, we are much more open to that kind of feedback, right? I would not have that kind of discussion with someone who's been in practice for a year, right? I'm trying to coach them and move them along and mentor them along, as opposed to someone that needs a little bit more of a, I don't want to say sterner words, but just more direct, right? So
thanks, Eric.
It is hard though, and you do have to think about it. I don't know what anyone else has any experience doing that kind of stuff, but.
I was just going to say, I don't have any experience doing that, but I think that it's important to start the conversation about what is the purpose of the feedback. And as a leader, you need to consider the needs of the followers, so the followership. If you want to be, a good leader, you need to be able to receive that feedback so that you can be a better leader that meets the needs of the followers. So we can change that lens from like, this is a personal attack on me and I'm not good enough, because having perfectionist traits, being in medicine, we're sort of like, this is personal. In fact, in your role as a leader, how can you serve your followers better? I think there would be that openness to take that feedback and with more grace, rather than it be an attack. So maybe starting that conversation about the lens with which you receive the feedback is important.
Yeah, that gratitude sort of word is a good way to take it from, I think. And if you think of, if you have to have a more challenging conversation as a leader to someone in your group who is more senior, I think sort of trying to sort of word it that they'll see the benefits of that feedback and they themselves take it with gratitude as well, although it can absolutely be a challenge.
Yeah.
And
we've had a couple of people in our department who have personality traits that they've actually gone to coaches for. This was mentioned earlier, and they went, the coaching was supplied by Nova Scotia Health because they have administrative roles, and they've found it phenomenally successful. So I would put that out there, and they meet quite frequently for a while, and then it tapered off, and they would meet regularly and pick it back and forth. And somebody has been doing it for 4 years now, and it has really improved his ability to recognize his traits and to manage them, both in his delivery of care to patients and also his engagement with the rest of us in the group. So that was a really, Judy, it was your slide that had that, I believe. Yeah, it was great. It's worked very well.
Yeah, and coach are probably a little less threatening, because they're not they don't have to be within your organization, and it's kind of punctual relationship. They can come in, help you with something. They're and then they less threatening. I think that's good.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really good. I want to be respectful of people's time. I see some little ones in there cuddling up to their parents. So I want to be conscious of people's time and respect that. That I think is a great place to end our first session. So lots of interaction. Thanks, Fred. I see your suggestion there. Again, if you've got suggestions of pieces there, please send them to Carol. We'll get them uploaded. The syllabus will be kind of a growing thing as we move along. So over the next 4 weeks, we'll collect lots of materials. The coaching is a great topic, and I think we can explore it in a little more detail later. So just a reminder to look at the self-reflection exercise that you have if you haven't done it already. Some of the stimulation of the thinking today. If you have a problem you want to discuss, please send it to us because at the last session we'll spend quite a bit of time on that as well as a journal club. So this is wonderful. We're a really great group. We're going to all learn together. So next week is really a session devoted. Certainly COVID is the topic, but lots of leadership comes out of that. The next session after that is on wellness and resilience, which goes through everything that Huma and Rod are going to leave. And then the final session, we have problem solving. And then we actually have a journal club that Eric and Lois are going to lead, because again, as you've seen, even the reference today, there actually is a literature on leadership. A lot of it's outside medicine. And I think that's some of the things we can also, we also learn. Okay, so thanks everyone. Caroline's put the information there for where to send information. We'll get it up and working, and have a good evening, and we'll check in next week. So good night, everyone.
Thanks, Doug.
Everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Don't forget your homework.